Late at night in Detroit, power usually looks clear and easy to spot. It's the black robe, the high wooden bench, the sharp sound of a gavel hitting wood and making everyone jump. That's what power looks like in a courtroom. But power feels very different when you're standing in the rain at midnight, with red and blue lights flashing behind you. That night, Officer Kyle Braddock thought he was doing something heroic. He thought he was cleaning up the streets. He thought he was about to make a big arrest that would look great on his record. Instead, he was about to destroy his own life. It was 11:45 p.m. on a Tuesday. The rain wasn't pouring hard, but it wasn't gentle either. It was the kind of steady rain that makes the road shine like black glass. The streetlights along 8 Mile Road flickered and buzzed like they were tired of staying alive. Every now and then one would blink off and then back on again, like it was thinking about quitting. Judge Regina Sterling was driving slowly through that rain. She wasn't wearing her robe. She wasn't wearing pearls or heels. She was wearing a gray hoodie and a Detroit Tigers baseball cap pulled low over her forehead. Her expensive black slacks were hidden under the hoodie, and her face looked tired, very tired. She had just left the wake of her great-aunt Bessie in the neighborhood where she grew up, the Bottoms, a place full of cracked sidewalks, corner stores with metal bars on the windows, and memories that never fully fade. She had hugged cousins who smelled like cigarette smoke and hard years. She had eaten collard greens and cornbread off a paper plate while listening to old stories about when she was just little Gina. Now she just wanted to go home. The car she drove didn't match the neighborhood. It was a restored cherry red 1969 Mercedes-Benz 280 SL, the kind of car that makes strangers stare, the kind of car that whispers money. But Regina didn't inherit wealth. She earned every dollar. Law school. Years as a public defender. Long nights reading case files. Hard battles in courtrooms where nobody expected her to win. That car wasn't just metal and leather. It was proof. 2 blocks behind her, sitting in the dark shadow of an abandoned gas station, a Ford Explorer police interceptor idled quietly. Inside sat Officer Kyle Braddock. Kyle was 34 years old. He had a sharp jawline he admired in mirrors and a temper he never believed was a problem. He thought he deserved respect automatically. He thought the badge on his chest made him important. In the passenger seat sat Officer Ben Ali. Younger, quieter, knew enough to still hesitate before resting his hand near his holster. "Anything?" Ben asked. "Quiet as a tomb," Kyle muttered, chewing on a toothpick. Then he saw it. The red Mercedes glided past the intersection, clean and shining under the broken streetlights. Kyle leaned forward. "Wait," he said slowly. "Look at that." Ben glanced up. "Nice ride." "Too nice," Kyle replied. His eyes narrowed. In his mind, that car didn't belong here. It didn't fit. And instead of asking why, he decided he already knew the answer. "Vintage Benz," Kyle said. "German plate on the front, Michigan on the back. You know who drives something like that around here at midnight?" Ben shrugged. "Maybe a collector." Kyle laughed sharply. "Drug dealer. Or someone who just stole it from Bloomfield Hills." Ben started typing to run the plate. Kyle didn't wait for the result. He slammed the SUV into drive and pulled out fast, tires hissing on wet pavement. He didn't turn on his lights yet. Instead, he followed close behind the Mercedes. Too close. His headlights flooded Regina's rearview mirror, bright and aggressive. Inside her car, Regina frowned. She tapped her brakes lightly, not enough to stop, just enough to signal. "Back up," Kyle smirked. "Oh, you want to play," he muttered. Then he flipped the switch. Red and blue lights exploded into the darkness. The rain caught the colors and scattered them across the road like broken glass. Regina sighed. Not scared, just tired. She signaled properly and pulled over into a well-lit bus stop area. She turned off her music, rolled her window halfway down, placed both hands at 10 and 2 on the steering wheel. She knew the rules. She knew the statistics. Kyle stepped out of his cruiser slowly, adjusting his belt. His boots splashed through shallow puddles as he walked toward her door. One hand hovered near his weapon, his chest puffed slightly. He didn't approach carefully. He approached confidently. He tapped the glass with his flashlight. Hard. "Roll it down all the way," he ordered. Regina pressed the button. The window slid down fully. "Good evening, officer," she said calmly. "Is there a problem?" Her voice was steady, educated, clear. Kyle didn't like that tone. He lifted his flashlight and shined it directly into her eyes. "License and registration." "It's in my purse on the passenger seat," Regina replied. "I'm going to reach over and get it." "Keep your hands where I can see them," Kyle snapped. Ben shifted uncomfortably on the other side of the car. Regina kept her voice controlled. "Officer, I am informing you of my movement, so you do not misunderstand." Kyle's jaw tightened. "Step out of the vehicle." Regina blinked. "For what reason?" "I smell marijuana." The rain seemed to grow louder in the silence that followed. Regina's eyes turned cold. "That is not true," she said clearly. "There is no marijuana in this vehicle." Kyle's expression darkened. "Are you calling me a liar?" He yanked the door open. Rain splashed onto the leather seat. "Out, now." Regina stepped out into the rain. She stood straight. "You are making a mistake," she said evenly. "A very expensive one." Kyle laughed. "Turn around." He grabbed her shoulder and spun her toward the hood of her own car. The cold metal pressed against her cheek. "I have identification," Regina said firmly. "My name is Regina Sterling. I am a Superior Court judge in the 4th District." Kyle barked out a laugh. "Yeah? And I'm the Queen of England." Ben glanced at the registration in his hand. "Kyle, it says Sterling. It matches." "Shut up, Ben," Kyle snapped. "She probably stole it." He grabbed Regina's wrists and snapped metal cuffs around them, too tight. The metal bit into her skin. "You are arresting me?" she asked quietly. "Grand theft auto. Resisting arrest. Maybe more once I search this ride." He leaned close. "You picked the wrong night to drive through my town, sweetheart." Regina did not fight. She did not scream. She memorized his face. His name tag, K. Braddock. Badge number 5924. She looked back at her car, standing open in the rain. "That vehicle requires a flatbed tow," she said calmly. "If you tow it incorrectly, you will damage the transmission." "Not my problem." Kyle shoved her into the back of the cruiser and slammed the door. The red and blue lights reflected in the rain as the car pulled away. Kyle believed he had just made a powerful arrest. He had no idea that in less than 12 hours he would be standing in front of the very woman he had just handcuffed, and the balance of power would not be in his favor. The ride to the 4th Precinct should have been quiet and professional. It wasn't. From the back seat, Regina watched everything. Kyle drove with one hand while typing on the mounted computer with the other. Every few seconds he glanced down at his personal phone. Rain streaked across the windshield in uneven lines while he laughed at something on the screen. "Did you see her face?" Kyle chuckled, looking at Ben. "I'm a judge. That's a new one." Ben didn't laugh. "She said her name was Regina Sterling," Ben said quietly. "That's the same name on the registration." Kyle rolled his eyes. "People memorize names off mailboxes. It's not that deep." Regina sat upright despite the strain on her shoulders from the cuffs. The plastic bench was hard and cold. The cage divider blocked her from the front seats, but not from hearing them. "As a matter of fact, Officer Braddock," she said calmly, "it is that deep." Kyle laughed louder. "Still committing to the story, huh? I admire dedication." Ben stared down at the registration card again. "Kyle, the address is Palmer Woods." "So, that's one of the richest neighborhoods in the city." Kyle shrugged. "Rich people's cars get stolen, too." He turned the radio up, drowning out further conversation. Regina fell silent, but her silence was not surrender. It was calculation. She noticed the time on the dashboard clock. 12:07 a.m. She noticed the case docket pulled up on Kyle's laptop screen when he adjusted it. State v. Halloway, DUI. Courtroom 4, B, 9 a.m. She said nothing. The cruiser pulled into the precinct lot. Fluorescent lights flickered over cracked pavement. The building looked tired, brick darkened by decades of weather and neglect. Kyle stepped out first and yanked the back door open. "Watch your head," he said, though his tone held no care. Regina stepped out carefully. Inside the station, the smell hit immediately. Industrial cleaner mixed with sweat and stale coffee. The booking area buzzed with low conversations, clacking keyboards, and the occasional drunk shouting from somewhere deeper inside. "What you got, Braddock?" a desk sergeant asked without looking up. "Grand theft auto," Kyle announced loudly, "and she thinks she's a judge." A few officers nearby smirked. Regina stood straight. Her hoodie was damp. Her wrists were red where the cuffs had pressed into her skin. "Name?" the sergeant asked. "Regina Sterling." "Date of birth?" She gave it. "Occupation?" "Superior Court Judge." The pen stopped moving. The sergeant finally looked up. He studied her face carefully. Then he looked at Kyle. "She's serious?" he muttered. "She's delusional," Kyle replied quickly. "Book her." There was hesitation in the room. Crazy people usually yell, cry, protest loudly. Regina did none of that. She simply waited. The booking officer, a young woman named Alvarez, gently removed the cuffs. Regina rubbed her wrists, breathing through the soreness. "Press your fingers here," Alvarez said softly. Regina complied. The fingerprint machine beeped. Her mugshot was taken. Flash, front, flash, side. "One phone call," Alvarez said. Kyle leaned against the wall nearby, arms crossed. "Make it quick." Regina picked up the receiver. She did not dial her family. She did not dial a bondsman. She dialed a number she knew by heart. Sarah Jenkins answered groggily. "Regina, it's midnight. I've been arrested." There was a long silence. "You what?" "Officer Kyle Braddock, 4th Precinct, Grand Theft Auto." "What?" "I'm coming right now. I'll call the chief." "No," Regina interrupted firmly. Kyle straightened slightly, listening. "No," Sarah repeated. "Do not call the chief. Do not bail me out immediately." "Regina, are you hurt?" "I'm fine," Regina replied. "But listen carefully. This officer has court in the morning." "So?" "I saw his docket on the dashboard laptop while he was driving. State Vive Halloway. DUI. Sarah inhaled sharply. "And you're presiding?" "Yes." Silence. "Oh my God. If you bail me out tonight," Regina continued, lowering her voice, "this disappears quietly. He gets a warning. He learns nothing. And if you don't, he walks into my courtroom tomorrow morning, confident and comfortable." Sarah exhaled slowly. "You're spending the night in jail." "I grew up 3 blocks from here," Regina replied. "I can handle one night." Kyle shifted, trying to hear. "Meet me at the courthouse at 7 a.m. Bring a fresh suit, spare keys, and if possible, bring someone discreet with a camera." "You're terrifying," Sarah muttered. "I'll see you at 7. Regina hung up. Kyle smirked. "Nobody coming to rescue you?" Regina looked at him evenly. "I'll see you in the morning, Officer Braddock." Kyle laughed, but something in her tone unsettled him. He pushed it aside. He escorted her down a narrow hallway toward holding. The heavy metal door to cell 2 screeched open. Concrete walls, metal bench bolted to the floor, stainless steel toilet, cold. "Home sweet home," Kyle said. He shoved her inside and slammed the door. The lock clanged loudly. Regina sat on the bench. The cold seeped through her clothes instantly. Across from her, a young woman sat curled in the corner wearing a thin tank top, despite the chill. After several minutes of silence, the girl spoke. "You look like a teacher." Regina gave a faint smile. "Not quite. What you in for?" "Driving while black," Regina replied dryly, and apparently impersonating a judge. The girl laughed bitterly. "They got you too, huh?" "Too? Officer Braddock," the girl said. "He's the worst." Regina turned slightly. "How so?" "He broke my boyfriend's arm last year during a stop. Said he tripped." Regina listened carefully. "He likes to scare people," the girl continued. "Makes him feel big." Regina folded her hands in her lap. This was no longer about personal humiliation. This was about pattern, about abuse, about a man who believed power meant domination. The hours crawled. Guards walked past occasionally. One stopped and smirked. "Hey, Judge," he mocked. "Need a gavel? I got a plunger." Regina didn't respond. She closed her eyes. Not to sleep. To think. She replayed every second of the stop in her mind. The false marijuana claim, the failure to run plates, the mocking tone, the unnecessary force. She constructed her argument carefully, step by step. At 6 a.m., the shift changed. Keys jingled. The cell door opened. "Sterling, you made bail." Regina stood slowly. Her muscles ached. Her clothes were wrinkled. Her wrists still throbbed. Before leaving, she turned to the young woman. "When you see the judge, ask for Public Defender David Thorne. Tell him Regina sent you. Tell him to challenge probable cause." The girl blinked in confusion. Why would he listen? "He will," Regina replied simply. In the lobby, Sarah Jenkins paced anxiously, holding coffee and a garment bag. When she saw Regina, her face fell. "They actually processed you?" "Yes. They treated you like any other defendant." That was the point. Regina took the coffee and drank it black. The warmth spread through her chest. "Let's go," she said. They drove toward the courthouse as the sky lightened from black to gray. Rain slowed to a mist. Regina stared out the window. The fear from the night before was gone. In its place was something colder, controlled, focused. When they reached the courthouse, they entered through the private judge's entrance. Inside her chambers, Regina showered quickly, scrubbing away the smell of the holding cell. She dressed in a crisp white blouse and tailored black skirt, applied makeup carefully, pulled her hair into a sleek bun. Then she faced the wardrobe. Her robe hung there heavy and black. She slid her arms into the sleeves, zipped it up, looked in the mirror. The woman from the holding cell disappeared. Judge Regina Sterling stood in her place. And in less than an hour, Officer Kyle Braddock would walk into her courtroom. Outside courtroom 4B, the hallway was already busy. Lawyers whispered over folders. Defendants fidgeted with cheap ties. Families sat on benches, some praying quietly, some crying softly. The whole place smelled like old paper, coffee, and stress. Officer Kyle Braddock stood near the water fountain holding a styrofoam cup of lukewarm coffee. He looked clean and confident now. He had showered, shaved, and put on his dress uniform. His badge was polished so bright it could catch the overhead lights. He felt good. He felt important. He had told the story of last night at a bar after his shift, laughing about the psycho lady who claimed she was a judge. His friends laughed until they had tears in their eyes. Kyle loved that feeling, being the center of the story, being the guy everyone listened to. Assistant District Attorney Clayton Hayes walked up, straightening his tie. Hayes was the kind of prosecutor who loved easy wins and hated surprises. "Braddock," Hayes said. "You ready for Holloway? This should be clean, right?" Kyle flashed a charming grin. Textbook. Guy was weaving, slurring, failed the test. Dash cam solid. Easy conviction. Hayes nodded, checking his watch. "Good. Judge Sterling is presiding today. She's strict about procedure. Keep your answers short and professional." Kyle smirked. "Sterling?" "Yeah, I've heard of her. The Iron Lady. I'm not worried. I'm the good guy." Hayes gave a short laugh that didn't sound amused. "Just don't get cocky. She eats cocky for breakfast." Hayes walked off. Kyle rolled his eyes and took a sip of coffee. Then he saw Ben Ali standing near the doors looking pale. Ben's eyes kept darting around like he was waiting for something bad to happen. Kyle walked over. "Benny, you look like you're about to puke." Ben swallowed hard. "Kyle, I checked the roster." Kyle sighed dramatically. "And? Judge Sterling is in this courtroom. This courtroom. That woman last night. She said she was Judge Sterling." Kyle scoffed. Common name. Or she heard the judge's name somewhere. People do that. Ben's voice shook. "Kyle, the registration matched. The system matched. What if—" Kyle cut him off. "Stop it. You're acting like a guilty puppy. Stand up straight and look tough." Ben didn't answer. He just stared down at the floor. At that moment, the heavy courtroom doors swung open. Deputy Carter, the bailiff, stepped out. Carter was huge, 6'5", with a shaved head and a voice that could silence a riot. "Court is about to be in session," Carter bellowed. "All parties for State versus Holloway, please enter." Kyle tossed his empty cup into the trash and adjusted his gun belt. "Showtime," he said to Ben. "Let's go put another drunk driver away." Kyle walked into the courtroom with confidence, like he belonged there, like the whole building existed for him. Inside, it was cool and quiet. The wooden benches creaked. The air conditioning hummed. The defendant, Mr. Holloway, sat at the defense table looking miserable, like a man who already knew he was cooked. Kyle took his seat in the front row reserved for law enforcement. He crossed his legs, relaxed. He even winked at the court reporter, remembering he'd flirted with her once at a holiday party. The room slowly settled. Deputy Carter moved into position. "All rise," Carter's voice boomed. Everyone stood. "The Fourth Circuit Court is now in session," Carter announced. "The Honorable Judge Regina Sterling presiding." Kyle stood too, smoothing his uniform. He stared toward the door behind the bench, expecting an older woman, maybe stern-looking, maybe distant. The door opened, and Kyle's world stopped. Regina Sterling walked in. She moved calmly, like she had all the time in the world. Her robe flowed around her like a storm cloud. Her hair was pulled into a neat bun. Her face was clean and composed, no rain, no hoodie, no exhaustion showing. But the eyes were the same. Those deep, sharp eyes. Kyle felt his stomach drop like he'd missed a step on a staircase. No, 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 no. He couldn't breathe properly. His hands went cold. He looked at Ben. Ben's face was drained of color, staring straight down at his own shoes like he wanted to vanish through the floor. Regina walked up to the bench and arranged her files. She placed her reading glasses on her nose. Then she lifted her gaze. Her eyes swept across the room and landed directly on Kyle Braddock. Kyle felt like someone had poured ice water down his spine. He sat down hard, legs refusing to cooperate. "Be seated," Judge Sterling said. Her voice was crisp, calm, and deadly steady. The case began. Hayes stood. "Ready for the people, Your Honor." The defense lawyer mumbled. "Ready for the defense, Your Honor." Regina nodded, calling the case of State versus Holloway. Charges: driving under the influence, reckless endangerment. Hayes called Kyle to testify. Kyle stood on legs that didn't feel real. He walked to the witness stand step by step, like he was walking toward a cliff. He raised his trembling hand as the clerk swore him in. "State your name and badge number for the record." Kyle swallowed. "Kyle Braddock, badge 5,924. He sat and kept his eyes forward, refusing to look at Regina again. He was terrified that if he made eye contact, he would pass out. Hayes began. "Officer Braddock, on the night of August 14th, did you initiate a traffic stop involving the defendant?" "Yes," Kyle said, clearing his throat. "Yes, I did. And why?" He was swerving, crossing the center line. "And when you approached, what did you observe?" Kyle forced his voice steady. "I smelled alcohol." His eyes were bloodshot. Hayes continued through the usual questions. Field sobriety test. Results. Dashcam. Everything neat and predictable. Hayes smiled. No further questions. The defense attorney stood to cross-examine, but Regina raised a hand. "One moment," she said. The defense attorney froze mid-step. Hayes blinked. "Your Honor?" Regina turned fully toward Kyle, leaning forward slightly. The microphone caught the soft rustle of her robe, a sound that somehow felt like a warning bell. "Officer Braddock," she said calmly, "I have a few questions for you regarding your observational skills." Kyle's mouth went dry. "Yes, Your Honor." "You are capable of identifying signs of impairment?" "Yes." "You are capable of identifying valid registration and identification documents?" "Yes." "And you pride yourself on following proper procedure, including probable cause?" "I do." Regina picked up a piece of paper from her desk. Not a court filing, not evidence from the DUI case. Kyle's eyes locked onto it, confused and afraid. "Officer Braddock," Regina said, voice turning slightly colder, "let's talk about credibility, because credibility is the currency of this courtroom. If an officer's word cannot be trusted, then his testimony is worthless." Kyle swallowed so hard his throat hurt. "Yes, Your Honor." Regina tilted her head. "Last night, at approximately 11:50 p.m., did you perform a traffic stop on a cherry-red 1969 Mercedes-Benz on 8 Mile Road?" Hayes shot up. "Objection. Relevance." Regina snapped without even looking at him. "Overruled." Sit down, Mr. Hayes. This goes to the witness's competence and truthfulness. Hayes sat slowly, stunned. Regina stared at Kyle. Answer the question. Kyle's voice cracked. Yes. And did you arrest the driver of that vehicle for grand theft auto? Kyle's hands shook on the stand. Yes. And what was the basis for that arrest? Kyle opened his mouth. Nothing came out. Regina's voice sharpened. Did you run the plates before making the arrest? Kyle whispered. No. Speak up, Regina said. Kyle's voice burst out, panicked. No, I didn't run them until after. The courtroom was silent. Even the defendant looked surprised now. Regina nodded slowly. And when you arrested the driver, did the driver identify herself? Yes. Did she tell you her name was Regina Sterling? Kyle's face looked grey. Yes. Did she tell you she was a superior court judge? Kyle barely managed the word. Yes. Regina leaned forward. And what did you say to her, officer? Kyle stared down at his shaking hands. Regina didn't wait long. She spoke clearly, repeating his words like she'd carved them into stone. You said, yeah, and I'm the Queen of England. And you told her, you picked the wrong night to ride through my town, sweetheart. Is that correct? Kyle couldn't answer. Regina sat back slightly. Let the record show the witness is silent. Then she looked directly at the courtroom, at the prosecutor, and at the people watching, and her voice became the sound of a door slamming shut. Mr. Hayes, she said, last night, this officer arrested me. A gasp rippled through the room. Kyle's head snapped up, eyes wide with terror. Regina's gaze did not soften. He handcuffed me, she continued. He ignored my identification. He fabricated a smell of marijuana to remove me from my vehicle. He impounded my car, and he placed me in a holding cell at the 4th Precinct where I remained until this morning. The courtroom reacted like someone had dropped a bomb. Whispers, shocked faces, hands covering mouths. Regina stood behind the bench, towering now. I am the woman in the Mercedes, Officer Braddock, she said. I am the sweetheart you ordered to spread her legs on the hood of her own car. Kyle blurted, desperate. I didn't know. I swear, Your Honor, I didn't know it was you. Regina pointed at him like her finger was a blade. That, she said, voice sharp and final, is exactly the problem. That is exactly the problem, Regina said. You didn't treat me with dignity because you didn't know I had power. You treated me like trash because you thought I was nobody. And if you treat a nobody like that, then I have to ask a very simple question. She paused, letting the silence grow heavy. How can this court trust a single word out of your mouth? Kyle's lips trembled. His eyes darted to the prosecutor like a kid looking for a parent to rescue him. Hayes looked stunned, like his brain had stalled. Regina's voice stayed calm, but it hit hard. You want me to believe you followed procedure with Mr. Holloway. You want me to believe you observed every detail carefully. Yet less than 12 hours ago, you couldn't even do the basics. You didn't run a plate. You didn't verify an ID. You didn't check the VIN. You just decided I was guilty because you didn't like what you saw. Kyle choked out. Your Honor, Regina lifted her hand. No, you will not talk your way out of this. Not here. Not under oath. She turned slightly toward the prosecutor. Mr. Hayes, your case relies on this officer's credibility, and his credibility is gone. Hayes stood again, voice shaky. Your Honor, if I may. Regina cut him off. Sit down, Mr. Hayes. Hayes sat like someone had pulled the chair out from under him. Regina looked at the defense attorney next. Counselor, based on the court's finding that Officer Braddock's testimony is unreliable, this case cannot continue. She grabbed the gavel. Bang! Case dismissed. For a second, nobody moved. It felt like the whole room forgot how to breathe. Then the defendant's head snapped up. Wait, what? You are free to go, Mr. Holloway, Regina said. Crisp and clear. The defense attorney blinked, then quickly started gathering papers like he was afraid the moment might vanish. Kyle's face was soaked in sweat now. He sat frozen, staring straight ahead like if he stayed still enough, maybe this wouldn't be real. But Regina wasn't finished. She leaned toward Deputy Carter, the bailiff. Deputy Carter. Yes, Your Honor, Carter said, stepping forward. Take Officer Kyle Braddock into custody. Kyle's head whipped around. What? No, you can't. Regina's eyes stayed locked on him. I can, and I am. Carter moved toward Kyle, with the same steady confidence Kyle had used on the street the night before. Carter's big hand grabbed Kyle's shoulder. Kyle tried to pull away, panic rising in his voice. This is insane. I didn't know who she was. Regina's voice sharpened. That is not a defense. That is a confession. She sat up straighter. Officer Braddock, I am holding you in direct contempt of court for lying under oath about your adherence to procedure and for violating the rights of a citizen under color of authority. Hayes stammered. Your Honor. Regina turned her head slowly, like a knife pivoting. Mr. Hayes, I want criminal charges filed today. False imprisonment, assault, civil rights violations, and I want his badge and weapon turned in immediately. Hayes looked like he might faint. Yes, Judge. Kyle's eyes went wide. Ben, say something. Ben Ali sat stiff in the back row, staring at his own hands. His face was pale, and he looked sick with shame. He didn't move. Carter twisted Kyle around and snapped handcuffs onto his wrists. The metal clicked shut, loud in the quiet room. Kyle's breath came fast. He looked around at the gallery. People were staring at him like he was something ugly they'd just discovered in their food. Carter recited, flat and professional. You have the right to remain silent. Kyle barked. This is bullshit. Regina slammed the gavel once more. Enough. Carter led Kyle out of the courtroom. Kyle's boots scraped against the floor like he was being dragged through his own downfall. Regina watched him go. Her hands were steady, but inside, her body trembled with adrenaline. Not because she was afraid, because she had been forced to hold rage in her chest for hours, and now it was finally being released in the only place it mattered. When the doors closed behind Kyle, Regina took a deep breath, straightened her robe, and looked at the clock. Next case. Outside, the hallway had gone quiet. People whispered, like they'd just watched lightning strike. Kyle was taken down to holding, placed in a cell, and suddenly the world he used to command felt tiny and cold. The same concrete, the same metal bench, the same air that smelled like bleach and sweat. But this time, the uniform didn't protect him. 3 hours later, the union representative, Sergeant Kowalski, arrived. Normally, Kowalski walked like nothing could touch him. Today, he looked pale and tense. He didn't even step inside the cell. He stood outside the bars holding a folder like it weighed 100 pounds. Stan, Kyle said quickly, gripping the bars. Get me out. She set me up. Kowalski's eyes stayed on the floor. Kyle, shut up. I'm the victim here, Kyle hissed. She didn't identify herself properly. Kyle, Kowalski snapped, voice echoing off concrete. Stop talking. Kyle froze. What's happening? Kowalski opened the folder and held up a glossy printout. It was a still image from Kyle's dashcam. Regina, in the rain, hands visible, calm face turned toward the window. We reviewed the tape, Kowalski said. The audio is clear. She told you her name. She told you she was a judge. She told you where her ID was. Kyle swallowed. So what? People lie. And you mocked her, Kowalski continued. You ordered her out. You tightened the cuffs. You joked about Judge Judy. It's all on there. Kyle's voice cracked. But the Brotherhood. Kowalski looked up finally, and his eyes held zero warmth. Someone leaked the courtroom audio too. It's everywhere. Twitter, TikTok, news sites. The mayor already did a press conference. Kyle felt his stomach twist. The mayor, he called you a cancer on the badge, Kowalski said quietly. Kyle's hands started shaking. Stan, please. I have bills. I have a mortgage. Kowalski took a small step back. You should have thought about that before you arrested a Superior Court judge because she drove a nice car. Kyle's mouth fell open. So you're representing me, right? Kowalski's answer was cold. No. The union is cutting you loose. We can't touch this. You're radioactive. Kyle's voice jumped. Wait. Stan. Kowalski turned away, then paused, looking back over his shoulder with a grim kind of pity. Your wife saw the news, Kyle. She called the station. She's not coming. She said she's going to her sister's in Ohio. Kyle staggered back like he'd been hit. Kowalski walked away. The hallway door clanged shut, and for the first time in Kyle Braddock's life, nobody was coming to save him. That evening, 2 internal affairs detectives arrived. No friendly jokes, no, "How you holding up, buddy?" Just hard faces and a recorder. Detective Reynolds sat across from him in a small interview room. Her eyes were sharp and tired, like she'd seen this movie too many times. "Officer Braddock," she said, clicking on the recorder. "We're not only investigating the Sterling arrest. That incident opened a door. We're reviewing your last 50 stops." Kyle tried to sit tall, but the cuffs on his wrists made him feel smaller. "This is a witch hunt," he muttered. Reynolds flipped open a thick file. "Is it? August 4th. Marcus Johnson, broken eye socket during a traffic stop. You wrote that he resisted. The dashcam malfunctioned." Kyle's jaw tightened. Reynolds turned a page. "July 12th. Sarah Bennett, 19 years old. You arrested her for disorderly conduct after she refused to give you her phone number. We pulled the texts you sent her from your personal device." Kyle's throat went dry. He looked away. Reynolds leaned in slightly. "You're not just losing your job, Kyle. You're looking at criminal charges. Real time." Kyle whispered, "I was doing my job." Reynolds shut the folder with a heavy thud. "No, you were bullying people because you could, and you finally bullied the one person who could hit back." She stood up, gathered her files, and walked out, leaving Kyle alone with the buzzing fluorescent light and the sound of his own breathing. 6 months later, the case everyone in Detroit was talking about finally went to trial. Kyle Braddock didn't walk into court like a confident cop anymore. He walked in like a man carrying a heavy bag he couldn't put down. He wore a cheap suit that didn't fit quite right. His hair looked thinner. His face looked older. The swagger was gone, replaced by a nervous twitch in his jaw and the tired look of someone who hadn't slept well in a long time. Judge Regina Sterling did not sit on the bench for the trial. She couldn't. It would have been a conflict. Another judge, Judge Harrison, took the seat instead. People said Harrison was lenient with police officers. And for a tiny moment, Kyle felt a spark of hope. That hope didn't last, because Regina Sterling was the key witness. When she stepped into the courtroom, the whole room changed. She wasn't wearing her robe. She wore a cream-colored suit and moved with calm control, like a person who refuses to be shaken. She raised her hand, was sworn in, and looked straight at Kyle. Not with rage, not with drama, with steady truth. She told the jury exactly what happened, step by step, from the first flashing lights to the cell door clanging shut. She described the fear she felt, not because she thought she was weak, but because she knew how fast a simple stop could turn deadly when an officer decided your life didn't matter. She explained that she had power in the city, yes, but most people in her neighborhood didn't. They couldn't call a lawyer at midnight. They couldn't walk into court the next morning and make the room go silent. They just had to survive. Then she said the sentence that stayed in the news for weeks. "He didn't arrest me because I committed a crime," Regina told the jury. "He arrested me because he couldn't accept that a black woman in a hoodie could own that car. His ego mattered more to him than the law." Kyle's lawyer tried to fight it, tried to twist words, tried to make it sound like a misunderstanding. But the videos, the audio, the paperwork, and the old complaints were too heavy to ignore. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours, guilty on all counts. When the verdict was read, Kyle didn't shout. He didn't argue. He simply slumped forward, forehead touching the table like his body finally gave up pretending. Judge Harrison looked down at him. "Mr. Braddock," he said, "you have disgraced the uniform and damaged public trust. You are sentenced to 8 years in the custody of the Michigan Department of Corrections. You are remanded immediately." Kyle was taken away. Prison was not kind to an ex-cop. He spent his first years in protective custody, isolated, hated by inmates who saw him as the enemy, and disliked by guards who saw him as an embarrassment. His house was foreclosed. His truck was repossessed. His pension disappeared. His name became something people spat out like a bad taste. Regina filed a civil lawsuit and won. Every dollar she received, she put into a legal defense fund for people who couldn't afford to fight back. People who had been pushed around, arrested for nothing, scared into silence. The news stations replayed the moment of his arrest in court over and over. People on talk radio argued all day about bad apples and good cops, and folks in Regina's old neighborhood nodded like, "See, we've been telling you." In the weeks after the verdict, former defendants started coming forward with their own stories. Some showed bruises, some showed paperwork, some just showed up with shaking voices and said, "He did that to me too." The city couldn't pretend it was one isolated mistake anymore. Kyle's mother sat in the back row of the courtroom during sentencing, crying into a tissue that was already soaked through. Kyle kept looking over his shoulder, searching for his wife Jennifer, but she never came. She had filed for divorce months earlier and left a short message through her lawyer. She was tired of living with the same anger he showed on the street. That message cut deeper than the handcuffs. Inside prison, time moved slow. Days blended together. Kyle learned what it felt like to be judged by one quick glance, to be treated like a problem instead of a person. He complained at first loudly until he realized nobody cared. Then he got quiet. He stared at the wall. He counted meals. He counted footsteps. He counted years. When he finally walked out, the sunlight didn't feel like freedom. It felt like exposure. People recognized him at gas stations. Someone once spit near his shoes and muttered, "Queen of England." Another time, a teenager held up a phone, recording, laughing, asking him to say "sweetheart" again. Kyle stopped going out unless he had to. He kept his head down, but the past stayed loud. Even the rain sounded different to him now. Less like weather, more like a reminder. Every drop felt like a finger tapping his shoulder. Remember, always remember. Years passed. Kyle got out. He was 47 but looked closer to 60. He couldn't get a decent job anywhere. The internet didn't forget. Every search of his name brought up the footage, the courtroom audio, the headlines, the humiliation. Nobody wanted him near customers, near tools, near anything that carried risk, so he ended up working as a cart pusher at a discount grocery store in the suburbs. One cold Tuesday afternoon in November, rain fell again, slick, grey and miserable, just like that night on 8 Mile. Kyle wore a bright yellow plastic poncho and pushed a long line of wet carts across the parking lot. His hands were chapped. His back ached. The wheels squeaked and rattled with every shove. A sleek black luxury car rolled up near the entrance. Kyle glanced over without thinking and froze. A woman stepped out holding a briefcase. Older now, hair touched with silver, but unmistakable. Justice Regina Sterling. She had risen even higher. 2 years earlier, she had been appointed to the Michigan Supreme Court. She was respected, famous, and seen as a symbol of standing strong when it mattered. Kyle gripped the cart handle so hard his fingers hurt. Regina paused and looked at him. Kyle waited for the insult. The speech. The "I told you so." He almost begged for it, because at least words would mean he still mattered enough to be noticed. But Regina didn't give him that. She looked at him for a long moment, expression calm and unreadable. Not anger, not pity, just quiet distance. Then she opened her umbrella and walked into the store without saying a single word. That silence hit Kyle harder than any shouted punishment. It told him the truth he couldn't escape. He was no longer powerful, no longer feared, no longer important. He wasn't a monster anymore. He was just a ghost in a yellow poncho pushing carts in the rain. From the automatic doors, the store manager yelled, "Hey, stop staring and get those carts inside. The floor's getting wet." Kyle swallowed and lowered his head. "Yes, sir," he whispered. He pushed the carts forward. The wheels squealed like handcuffs, clicking shut again and again. And that's how the scales balanced, not just in court, but in real life. Kyle thought power lived in a gun and a badge. He thought it meant you could dominate people you decided were less than. He learned too late that real power is character, restraint, and the law itself. He stole one night of Regina Sterling's freedom, and life took his future in return. So here's the simple lesson. Watch how you treat people when you think you're on top, because you never know who you'll meet when you're the one sliding down. If this story stuck with you, share it with someone who needs that reminder. And if you want more stories like this, like the video, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. Thanks for watching.